Okay, welcome everybody. We're giving everyone just a second to come into the webinar. We're so happy that you're all with us today to join us for the Taking Action Together program. My name is Lisa Bachman, and I am the Executive Director of the Alabama Holocaust Education Center. And I have to say, first of all, a huge thank you to Larry and Cinda Goldberg, Jeffrey and Gail Baer, as well as Ronnie and Donald Hess for their incredible support of this program. We have many partners who have helped us spread the word that are listed on our website, and I'm very thankful to our team, Hannah, Amy, and Mike, for helping with all the details, big and small. We are happy to provide these events at no cost. We are a 501c3 organization, and if you enjoyed today's program, we would greatly appreciate a gift of any size that will enable us to continue providing this important content. And you can visit our website to easily make a gift, and we will also put a link in the chat. So let's dig into the program. Although the divisiveness of our world started long before October 7th, it has truly escalated, and anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and many other forms of hate are on the rise, sadly. Our team receives calls frequently asking for help with how to communicate with family and friends who hold different views. Many of you have told us that respectful conversations have gotten harder, and that's why we put today's program together. Last night, I had the opportunity, as part of our Holocaust in Film series, to see the film Zone of Interest. It is a tough movie, and it tells the story of a Nazi family living outside of Auschwitz. Our mission compels us to use the history and lessons of the Holocaust to create a more just and compassionate world, recognizing the humanity of every individual. As I watched that movie last night, I sat there adamant that I could not find any humanity in that Nazi family that lived outside the gates of Auschwitz and had to know everything that was going on. So how do we learn from that? After the film, there was a person in the audience that made a comment that if only those people could have expanded their minds to be more human. Well, clearly they didn't have that capacity, but there were those who did. And I think it's really crucial for us to be sure that we open our minds and listen before we make judgments. I think that's really the important lesson that the Holocaust teaches us. I know that there have been times that I have made assumptions or snap judgments that have turned out to be incorrect. I'm sure many of you have done the same thing. As the Holocaust teaches us, it is incumbent upon all of us to examine the conclusions that we jump to and look at what our inherent bias is. It's imperative that we listen, really listen, because we just might find that we learned something important. In preparation for this program, I had a conversation with all of our speakers who I'm going to introduce in a second, and we specifically told them to be honest and to speak from their heart. I'm going to tell you, there are some things that you might hear today that might initially make you feel uncomfortable or that you might disagree with. That needs to be okay. As you leave any Taking Action Together program, my request is always that you take away something that you can put into action, whether it's for yourself, your family, the community. My ask today, right now, is that you sit back and really listen. Even when you disagree with something, even more so when you disagree, that's okay. It's okay to disagree. But if you listen, if you really listen, you just might be able to build some understanding. I'm very excited that you're going to hear how two people with some very different views were able to build bridges. I am not asking you to change your mind, simply to open your mind. Now, we're going to leave some time at the end of this program so that our speakers can answer your questions. You'll see at the very bottom of the screen is a little button that says Q&A. Please click that button at any time throughout the program to submit your question, and then we'll come back towards the end to make sure that we answer as many as we can. Also, this program is being recorded, and we hope that you will share it with anybody who is not able to attend today. Now, I could not be more excited to introduce our speakers. Our moderator is John Archibald, and John is a two-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize and a long-term fixture in the South, where he is a columnist for the Alabama Media Group. The 2018 Pulitzer jury described his columns as lyrical and courageous commentary that is rooted in Alabama, but has a national resonance in scrutinizing corrupt politicians, championing the rights of women, and calling out hypocrisy. He was the lead reporter in a series of articles that examined out-of-control policing in the tiny Alabama town of Brookside, which won him the 2023 Pulitzer for local reporting. That coverage also won the George Polk Award for local reporting, the Sidney Hillman Award for web journalism, and a Best in Show National Headliner Award, among others. Archibald wrote and co-hosted the National Murrow Award-winning podcast, Unjustifiable, in 2021. His book, Shaking the Gates of Hell, A Search for Family and Truth in the Wake of the Civil Rights Revolution, was named one of NPR's 2021 Books We Love. Leah Nelson serves as research director at Alabama Appleseed, where she coordinates and conducts original research into drivers of poverty, violence, and mass incarceration in Alabama. She is Appleseed's principal expert on collateral consequences of fines and fees. In 2021, Leah had the privilege of serving as a volunteer investigator with the legal team that helped Claudette Colvin successfully petition for expungement of her 1955 juvenile record. Leah grew up in Central Connecticut. She's a 2006 graduate of Columbia's Graduate School of Journalism and a 2002 graduate of the University of Connecticut. She lives in Montgomery with her husband and two children and attends Temple Beth Or. Ali Massoud is a JD candidate at the UCLA School of Law. He's on the staff of the UCLA Law Review, a recipient of Moot Court Honors, and a member of the Public Interest Law and Policy Program with a specialization in technology law. His interests lie in the intersection of artificial intelligence and civil rights. Prior to law school, Ali served as the government affairs coordinator for the Alabama chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights organization. There, he launched the state's first Get Out the Vote campaign, aimed at Muslim voters and spearheading campaigns for immigration and criminal justice reform. Ali grew up in Egypt and England before coming to the United States. He is a 2017 graduate of the University of Alabama at Birmingham, UAB. He lives in Los Angeles, where he is learning to surf and line dance, but not at the same time. With all of that, John, I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, this would be really scary in some ways if I didn't know Leah and Ali. And you know, we had some discussions earlier about yeah, we might make some people mad, and what do we say? Or do we answer things from our heart? And of course we do. If we don't, then there's really no point in being here. But I have no fear, because I know that Leah and Ali you know, value the same things in life, and that's being fair to other people. And over the past 4 months, you know, I've been greatly concerned at friends and acquaintances and people who did not know how to talk to each other in the wake of these events. And frankly, Leah reached out to me and said, "Hey, let me tell you this story." And Leah, tell us this story.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here and really honored. So thank you for the invitation. Yeah, so Ollie and I knew each other from around. Montgomery's advocacy community is pretty small, so you just end up encountering people, and I think he and I encountered each other first in 2017 at the State House doing some joint advocacy around criminal justice reform. but I didn't really know him that well until a couple of years later when a man named Dominique Ray was sentenced to be executed and had his execution date set at Atmore's Homeland Correctional Facility. Mr. Ray was Muslim and he was very devout and had been for a long time. And when they read him his execution warrant, he said that instead of having the usual Protestant chaplain assigned to him, he wanted to have his imam, who frequently visited him and was routinely at Pullman to minister to the Muslim incarcerated men there. And Alabama's Department of Corrections said no. Not only could he not have his imam, he could only have the Protestant chaplain, who is the employee in charge of escorting all men who are executed at Holman out of life, being with them as they're executed. Mr. Ray fought this in court as a violation of his religious liberty. And I was helping his legal team kind of build a case and make sure that people understood what was going on from a lay perspective. And I reached out to Ali because at the time he was with the Council on American Islamic Relations. And that's how we started working together, just trying to secure for this man whose life was being taken from him by the state of Alabama some measure of human comfort as he left this world. It was a really hard way to start working together, but it was also a way for Ali and I to really see who each other were and understand each other's values and what happens under pressure, extraordinary pressure, as someone is being executed. And there was nothing we could do to stop it.
Nali?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the invite to be here. I'm always happy anytime I get to do anything with Leah. So it's really nice to share this moment with all of you. I would just add that when Leah brought me on to that case, she warned me up front that it was going to be incredibly heavy. Death penalty work often is. And I think knowing that going in, I really relied on Leah to sort of guide me through this process. It was the first time that I had been involved in anything like this. And around the same time that this was going on, I was doing a lot of voter outreach around the state. I was driving around Alabama, going to mosques in small towns that you might not suspect would have a mosque. And while I was down in Mobile, Alabama, I actually ended up meeting Imam Yusuf, who was the imam ministering to the men at Holman in this case. And so he mentioned that this was going on as well. I sort of put two and two together and started to try and provide the Muslim perspective in this case, tried to make this known to our Muslim community. And I think throughout the case, what was so telling is that people of all different faiths were coming together for this mission. Obviously, Leah being Jewish, me being Muslim, so many other people who were both religious and non-religious, who really truly saw that there was something going on behind the scenes here on a legal level that said a lot about our justice system in the United States. And it was really encouraging to see people come together like that. You know, I've had a lot of moments in my life, especially working for a Muslim civil rights organization, where I felt like some of the issues that we were advocating for were things that only the Muslim community cared about. And to see people coming together around this issue to support Mr. Ray was really encouraging. And so I think that as tough as it was to work on that case, meeting sort of like in the crucible cemented our friendship in a way that I don't know what else could have. I think we both saw each other when stakes were highest and when we really needed to like pull through. And that just made me respect and admire Leah that much more after the sort of turmoil that we had to work through in that case.
And you became friends. Leah invited you to Seder, right? So
Yeah.
what was the story you were telling the
Yes.
other day?
Yeah, I did. I invited Ali to my Seder. I like Seder is my big like Jewish holiday. So my bio says that I attend Temple Beth Or, but I attend Temple Beth Or like twice a year. I am not a super observant Jew, but I do host a Seder at my house every year. And I include, like the 2 or 3 Jews that are around in Montgomery, and then a bunch of other people who I think might enjoy it or take something away from it. And it's relatively conventional, although I've mixed it up a little bit. And I never worry about inviting people who are from other religions. It's fine. I just kind of let them know what to expect and that they don't have to worry. They're not going to do anything wrong. It's going to be cool. So I was about to do the same with Ali. And then I realized that I had a real problem on my hands because not that he was Muslim, but he's Egyptian. And Egyptians are definitely the bad guys in Exodus. And I remember texting him and being like, okay, here's the thing. I can't get away from the fact that your team are the villains in this story that we're going to be telling. So just a heads up, I'm very sorry, but Pharaoh's the bad guy. And Ali texted me back saying, it's cool. I'm not ancient Egyptian. It'll be fine. And we went from there. We went from there and it was fine.
What did you think when she said that, Ali? Did you laugh?
I did. I thought it was hilarious. I mean, what's so funny is that all of our religions have so much in common. And when I read the Quran, like there's so many passages in there about Pharaoh and when he's Moses, and he's sort of the bad guy in our stories too. So I didn't take any offense to it. I remember when I was younger and I told kids at school that I was from Egypt, they thought it was so cool because that's where the pyramids were. And they would ask these silly questions like, you know, um, do you ride camels in Egypt? Which, like, I guess if you're doing the touristy things, you might. Or questions like, are you descended from pharaohs? And so, I told Leah I'm not descended from pharaohs. I take no no offense to the telling of this story. And in fact, I share the views that Pharaoh was the bad guy here, so nothing to be offended about.
So fast forward to October 7th, and things got weird, I guess, for an awful lot of us. A lot of people and talk about a little how you both felt at that time and how you ended up talking to each other about it. You can start, Ali.
Yeah. A second ago, Leah mentioned that when she was first inviting me to the Seder, there was this like sort of initial uh-oh moment, this hesitation. And what I really appreciated is that immediately after October 7th, I was sort of avoiding the world. I was seeing things come in on my phone. I didn't really want to engage with what was happening. I was still trying to process everything. And I saw this text from Leah just checking in. And it was so comforting to know that she was thinking about me because I was thinking about her as well. And it's not like I necessarily thought that anything had changed because I know how close we are. But at the same time, there were other Jewish friends I had who maybe I wasn't as close to, who I think, whether intentional or not, whether it was my fault or theirs, like sort of started to put distance between us. And it wasn't anything explicit, but it's just that, certain friends, when I would see them around campus, maybe the hellos weren't as warm as they normally are. Maybe the conversation didn't last as long as it usually did. Maybe it was just me, but maybe I sensed some like avoidance of eye contact. And I think a lot of people were just like nervous to approach this issue. They didn't want to talk about it. And I think what was so beautiful about that text message that I got from Leah is that it didn't even necessarily have to engage with any of that. It was just a really simple message, like checking in, seeing how I was doing, seeing how I was holding up, seeing how I was processing things. And I think that was a really, really valuable gesture.
What brought you to make that gesture, Leah?
Well, I'm very online. I'm on Twitter, still on there. And so on October 6th, there was a bomb threat issued to a number of congregations, Jewish congregations in Alabama. And I was still absorbing that and thinking about it a lot. Just was very upsetting. My Beth Orr was among them, and so was the other congregation in Montgomery. So it was like, who would do that? And then October 7th, rolled around. I do not believe there's any connection whatsoever between these bomb threats, which turned out to be false in Alabama on October 6th, and what happened in Israel on October 7th. But mentally, I was kind of already in a place of, I guess, high alert. And all of this astonishing, horrific news was rolling in. And honestly, just all day, right? Like every second you like refresh Twitter and there would be some new information, some new detail that was unbelievably horrific. And I was seeing a lot of takes that were surprising and profoundly upsetting from people who I would have thought would be more thoughtful. And so I needed to kind of excuse myself from the online world. But Montgomery is not a place where a lot of people were following this news that same way. There are not a lot of Jewish people here. I don't have a lot of friends here who I thought would care as much and as personally as I did. So I actually reached out to Ali because he was someone that I am good friends with and trust, who I figured he's probably about as upset about this as I am. And, I was a little bit worried because of all of the people I saw on Twitter who had takes that I didn't anticipate, like, oh God, what if I'm really wrong here? But I know him well enough to assume the best. And I was right. I mean, he was in roughly the same place as I was in those very first few days of like, what just happened and what does it mean? And it was all I was thinking about, and you too, I think.
How did he respond?
I mean, just something, it was not like the most articulate conversation that I think either of us have ever had, because there was nothing to say that was deep. It was like, I'm lonely. This sucks. This is so awful. My God, what is this going to mean?
But it was just this moment where you were able to breach that chasm in some way, even though you're not going to agree on everything as things played out, and you're not going to come from exactly the same place, but you're simply saying, you're my friend and you're still my friend.
And you're thinking about this and consumed by it too, right? Like that's the thing. Like we're both jointly horrified by this.
Yeah. And have you found that since that first moment, since that first reaching across, that you've each been able to sort of do that with other people? Or do you feel like that distance still exists in a lot of ways with other people? Either one of you?
I'll speak to this. By far, my interactions with Leah have been the most normal, the most as they were before. I think with a lot of my other friends, there has been a shift. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes that just means knowing each other on a deeper level than you did before. Um, I'll give two examples. One of my friends here at the law school, who's Jewish, I had a conversation with shortly after this happened, about the kidnapped posters that were going up. As I'm sure most of the people on this call know, the kidnapped posters were sort of styled after those like missing posters, to call attention to Israelis who had been taken hostage on October 7th, to make sure that people knew about their plight and to sort of drum up support for prioritizing getting them home. I think what started with very pure purposes sort of transformed on social media, as things often do on social media. And it sort of became this like TikTok challenge of put up a poster, see who takes it down, film them, and then post it somewhere online and call them anti-Semitic. And I think that people had different views on this, but for some, the intentions were not as pure. And I remember a group came on campus, a group of non-students, just people sort of from the outside community. And they hung up a bunch of these posters all across the student bulletin boards, which, normally are reserved for the student groups to put up posters about whatever activity they're hosting that week. And so Muslim students came by and they took those posters down, which, according to the school, they had every right to. It was the bulletin board for the students. They were students. They were part of these groups. They didn't put these posters up. But as soon as that happened, there were students waiting in the hallway to film them. And immediately that same day, we saw videos of UCLA students online getting called anti-Semitic, being doxxed. And that was a huge, huge concern for a lot of people on campus. And I talked to one of my friends about this, and he told me, I'm struggling right now to reconcile these two notions, because on the one hand, as a Jewish person, I have family and friends in Israel who have been affected by this. I have this sort of emotional connection to these posters. When I see them being taken down, I get really mad. And on the other hand, politically, I am not aligned with what the state of Israel is doing. I don't support their military actions. I consider myself an anti-Zionist, and I'm trying to hold space for these two conflicting things at the same time. And that really made me see this issue in a new way, because, this is a friend that I respect deeply, is incredibly articulate, incredibly intelligent. And hearing him say that, we shared a lot of the same political beliefs, but he was still really upset about these posters, sort of gave me pause when I considered the issue in a way that I hadn't before. And it added this sort of like nuance that I hadn't been considering. So that was one incident. And then another friend I had, the conversation didn't go as well, actually. We had a lengthy conversation one night when we were out with another group of friends, and we found ourselves sort of in a corner at some point in the night. And, he hadn't spoken to me in really months, like since October 7th. And I had sort of tried to do the thing that Leah did, where I sent a few text messages, sort of just checking in, talking about things that were unrelated to politics or the news. just to let him know that I was still there, just to let him know that there was a lifeline if he wanted to take it. And he didn't really engage. And so when we found ourselves, in a corner at this gathering with our friends, I took that opportunity to sort of like see, okay, how are we feeling? What's going on? And he said that he was glad that I brought it up because he wasn't going to. And I think that's also telling that people want to sometimes avoid confrontation and they won't bring up these difficult conversations unless someone else does. And I remember he told me for him, a big part of his calculus was that he's really heavily involved with the Jewish community on campus. A lot of his friends are also Jewish. His family is very conservative. And he was really concerned about how his friends and his community were going to view me as a Muslim, as someone who is pretty outspoken for Palestinian rights, as someone who sometimes wears the keffiyeh around campus as an expression of my support for Palestinian people. And he told me that, his friends were really upset with me. They viewed this symbolic act of me wearing a keffiyeh not as like solidarity with Palestinian, but as like an anti-Semitic act that was like personally targeting them. And he was nervous about in any way being associated with me because he didn't know how his friends were going to take it. And I was perfectly honest with him. I said, honestly, like you have spent our entire 1L year of law school complaining to me about these very friends and telling me about all the drama that was going on in your friend group. And now you're sort of letting their opinions affect your perception of me, even though you know me. And you know that I'm not doing this as an anti-Semitic act. And I'm like explicitly telling you what I am doing it for. And yet you have sort of chosen to ascribe this meaning to my actions that I never put out there. And to his credit, he did admit that a lot of what he was doing was based on emotions, and he realized that it wasn't rational, and he realized that it wasn't necessarily right. But at the end of the day, like what took priority for him was his connection to community, and he didn't want to jeopardize that. And he thought that being associated with me would jeopardize that. So, I encouraged him actually to have a conversation with the same friend from earlier who I had a successful conversation with. And he said that he would. And I hope that they do talk. And I hope that perhaps he changes his mind. But to be perfectly honest with you, like where we left the conversation was he asked me if I did see him around campus to not say hello, to sort of, give a smile and a wave, but like not have any conversations lest any of the other Jewish students around campus hear us talking. And I wasn't pleased with that. And to be perfectly honest, it was pretty hurtful. But at the same time, like, I know everyone's on their own individual journeys. I think he is younger than I am and perhaps still adjusting to the idea of like forming a friend group that isn't just based on, who you grew up with and sort of like automatically associating with those people. And I think that there's a lot of growing and maybe sort of gaining independence that needs to happen. But it's not something that happens overnight. And I didn't think that I could push it, and I didn't want to push it. And I sort of just left it at that. So some of the conversations are going to be successful, like my first story. Some of the conversations are not going to be successful, like my second story. I'm still maintaining that lifeline if he wants to come back and talk. And I'm trying to be patient and understanding about it.
Leah, do you want to respond to that, or what you want me to move on?
Oh, I'm so struck. First, Ollie, like I hadn't heard that whole tale, and I'm upset on your behalf. My experience has been so different and so much more. I mean, there's on campuses and in UCLA, it sounds like there's a pretty like dense population of people thinking about this and processing it for better and for worse. It's really different in Montgomery. So my experience has been really that there's not much of a community here to like process this with, which of course is part of the reason I reached out to Ollie to begin with, because I knew he'd be thinking about it as much as I was thinking about it. I figured at some point our perspective of who the protagonist is may have diverged, but like the fact that all parties were in a really bad place, I thought we will probably share that view, and I think we generally have and continue to. But here it's been really difficult because there are not a lot of people here with like rooted connection over there. I should say, you know, my Jewishness is not rooted in Israel. It's rooted in how I behave here in Montgomery and in America, which is like where I'm from. I've never been to Israel. And I don't know if I'll ever go. Nonetheless, you know, like most American Jews, I have like, you know, family friends there, and, you know, it's part of what it is to be an American Jew is that you know people from Israel. So it doesn't matter how I personally relate to the country. I still care more about what's happening in that place than I do about what's happening in, I don't know, Ireland or something. And that was nearly impossible to find in Montgomery, and making things even more challenging. Politically, I tend to be pretty progressive. But the people that were responding, at least in online spaces, who were progressive, tended to be pretty stridently and loudly describing the October 7th attack as an act of like radical revolution, and Hamas as a liberation movement, which in that moment, and still, I really think that that characterization of what happened in Israel on October 7th is not one that I could possibly endorse. I think Hamas is a terrorist group. I think that Israel has behaved horrifically since then. But there was no one to process that with. There was no one here to really like think these like complicated, conflicted thoughts with, because even here on the ground, I was seeing some of these divisions that I saw online play out among people who were taking sides like there were teams instead of human beings on the ground who were killing each other and being killed. So some friends who are very conservative called me right away. Like October 7th, October 8th, I got calls from people who I know from work I do at the State House and people I respect and like. That's why they have my cell number and we are friends. But I don't usually hear from them except for when we're like working together on something. They called to see how I was, almost exactly the way that I reached out to Ali to see how he was. The same vibe. How are you doing? They weren't trying to get anything else out of me. And I didn't hear from a lot of friends who are politically aligned with me. That was really hard, because generally my friends who I'm politically aligned with, I thought I shared more values with. It was hard not to just have people check in. And as time passed, that continued. I just think that it was hard for a lot of people to understand how I have not experienced this as like a reinforcement of my political views, but instead as like a kind of personally shattering tragedy, not a political one. And like kind of closing that out, there was a vigil run by some folks here who are Palestinian, and it was to remember and pray for and think of all of the Palestinians who had been killed in Gaza. And I went to that because I am thinking about them all the time. And Aya, the woman who ran it, was very warm, and we hugged each other, and it was great. There was only one other Jewish person there, and I wasn't that surprised because there aren't that many Jewish people in Montgomery to begin with, although that was still an underrepresentation. She and I sort of stood together. But what I noticed was like none of my friends who were there for Palestinians really stood with me in the ways that we like position ourselves in spaces to show who you're with. Nobody was there with me. And that really hurt. And I don't quite know what to make of it.
Well, I'm struck by the phrase, Ali, I think you used about the importance of being associated with community, and fear risking that. And, and I'm here speaking as some sort of Christianist agnostic, and I wonder, I mean, it seems like what this has done is sort of clarified that sense of needing to be affirmed by your community as much as anything. And I wonder how, how, especially for non-Jewish, non-Muslim Americans who are watching this, are you shocked a little bit by the inability of many of us to simply pay attention to what's going on and is so important in your communities? And I ask that, and I ask you to assess the way the American press has treated this as well.
What's sort of ironic is that when my friend told me this point about community, I thought to myself, this so closely parallels what I know to be true as a Muslim, which is that people are very concerned with how they're perceived in the community and what people at mosque are saying. And like, I think, this sort of goes back to something that I said earlier, which is that our religions, our religious backgrounds, our faith traditions have so much in common. Like the Abrahamic faiths in general have so much in common. And when he said this point about like community, I just remembered like all the times when I was growing up that was really a factor. And so I think that sort of like helped me to sympathize with him a little bit and not just like throw my hands up in the air and be like, okay, well, I'm giving up on this and I'm walking away. And I think, Leah really spoke so eloquently and also heart-wrenchingly about this. When this started happening and like students started organizing on campus, community was a big, big factor. Like when people get upset, they want to know that there is someone else who feels the same way, that there's, someone else who's thinking about these issues. Like that is that I think has been a huge part of like the motivating factor behind people organizing on campus. Like whether it's pro-Palestinian students, whether it's, Jewish students who happen to be pro-Israeli. And, I would also add that sometimes the delineations between those categories are not so distinct. There's plenty of Jewish students who are also pro-Palestinian. Though I will note that I do not know any Palestinian students who are pro-Israel. I think that sense of community is a big factor. I'll let Leah speak to this before I try to dive into the more thorny question of how the press and the media handled this.
Yeah, thanks. I think, my community is not necessarily, and probably largely because I live in a place where there aren't a lot of people who like share many identity factors with me. My community, is the people who were thinking deeply and carefully about this and are willing to say, my God, this is complicated. We don't know what this is going to mean. We don't know how this is going to shake out. and who are comfortable sitting with that discomfort and sorrow and grief. So that throughout this has been Ali. It's been my friend Emily, who works at the Equal Justice Initiative and spends her time taking people through their museum and thinking about, my God, what did slavery mean? What did it turn into, and what does it mean now? It hasn't been other Jewish people, and it hasn't been, I guess, any of my usual suspects. It's been people that I have been fortunate and am fortunate to know who are comfortable sitting with discomfort. I think that the press has, I mean, this is a foreign policy issue, right? It's a question of, who will win? It's a war. And that's all true, right? Some people will get some of what they want. Surely no one will get everything that they want after this all shakes out, and we don't know what that will look like in the end. Some people will be happy, some people will be okay, and some people will still be furious and fighting. I think it's okay for the press to cover that. I hate how much of that becomes sort of like, I think for me, I struggle with the consistent conflation of Jews and Israelis in the press, because although Jews, again, American Jews and probably around the world, Jews have people they know in Israel, and for that reason care about what happens in Israel because they want to know if their friends are okay and safe. That's not the same as like supporting the Israeli government or anything that the state chooses to do. And I see a lot of very, very careless reporting that reinforces the idea of dual loyalty, which is one of the oldest and most dangerous anti-Semitic tropes, right? I'm not loyal to Israel. I care about what happens because I'm loyal to my friends, but I'm not friends with the state of Israel. So a wish that I have for the press, and I see this at all levels, and I see it in excellent legacy media and in everything down from there. Many Jews are Zionists, not all Jews are, but Jews and Israelis are not synonymous.
In regards to the press, I'll say that first, just a observation. When I was back home over the holidays, my parents were watching a lot of Al Jazeera, specifically like Arabic language Al Jazeera, and their reporting on the ground, like from Palestinian journalists, was so different in terms of tone than anything that I was seeing in the United States. Honestly, I think that a big part of that has been the conflation, not just of Jews and Israelis, but also the conflation of anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. I have heard conflicting definitions of what Zionism is. So I will just say that I am not a supporter of the Israeli military specifically, and those like governmental and policy actions. I think that's a very different thing than I do not support or I dislike or I hate Jewish people or the Jewish faith. Those two things to me are night and day. And the conflation of them, I think, does a huge disservice to anyone participating in this conversation. I think that is my wish for the media, is to stop conflating those two ideas, because what we've seen is that this has always been the case, but especially since October 7th, like any sort of expression of solidarity with Palestine, any sort of support for the Palestinian people is immediately equated with pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. And like the way that the dominoes fall so quickly from saying like, I don't support 25,000 Palestinians being killed to, oh, well, then so that you must support like Israelis being killed. Like, no, no, just no. This has been a huge issue on campus, in colleges like across the country. I know it's been an issue at UCLA with students organizing here. anytime someone says like pro-Palestine, it's equated with something that it's not. And it goes back to an earlier point in the conversation about like when I wear a keffiyeh and I say like this is an expression of Palestinian solidarity, sometimes you've just got to like give people the benefit of the doubt and know that like that is what that means. They're telling you what their actions mean and like believe them.
What I mean, people are scared to death to talk about this in a lot of ways for a lot of different reasons. Because they believe that they will be labeled anti-Semitic or that are Islamophobic, as we talked about before, or that people will parse the number of deaths on one side versus the other, and about land and history that we don't have time to really get into today. But they feel like they don't have any idea what to say except for, something that comes across as, both sidesism. And what do people who are afraid to get into this? I mean, how should they talk? I mean, what should they ask questions? How do you get from fear to conversation?
And if I can just interject after this, I want to we've got a whole bunch of questions, so I do want to get to a couple, but that's
Sorry, so keep it short, guys.
I want you to answer it.
Well, actually, why don't we jump right into the questions? Because
Yeah.
you said one way to do it was to ask questions, and I think that's what we're here for. So let's do that.
Okay. So there have been a couple that are kind of along the same lines, in that, Ali, earlier you made the comment that a lot of Israelis or Jewish people that are supporting Palestine, but you made the comment, and I don't know if it was just on campus or in general, so I think we need just a little bit of clarification there. But a number of people are reacting to that you don't know any Palestinians who are pro-Israel. And so I think just if you can explain a little bit of that, because there are certainly a number of people who are wondering, so does that mean that you believe Israel does not have the right to exist? And how do we bridge that divide?
Great question. Glad you asked it, because I think it goes to both something that I said earlier, and that John just mentioned about like the both sides isms. For me, something that has been, well, let me just start off by saying, I do believe that the people who are currently in Israel deserve a place to live and to call home. And I think that me saying that I am in support of Palestine does not mean that I am not believing that Israel has a right to exist. So I want to be clear about that from the beginning. But I think something that really underlies my analysis of the situation is constantly power dynamics. Okay. It's just a fact that people on both sides have said that the other side does not deserve to exist, that this is their land, that the other side should just like go away. That is a fact. And I've heard that from people on both sides. So that's, I think, where people are getting both sides isms. I will also say that when I run this through a sort of power analysis lens, there is one side that has the power to make that a reality and to actually annihilate the other side. And there's one side that does not have that power. So to me, something I'm constantly thinking about is the fact that Israel has really tremendous military capabilities. Israel has a lot of funding from the US. Israel has a huge platform on the international stage. Palestine does not have any of that. And so that's something that I'm constantly concerned about when analyzing this situation.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go to another question because they're kind of pouring in. I think you've really sparked a whole lot of thought, which is great. We have a person who said that they are a longtime member of the JCC, which is the Jewish Community Center, and that they have a number of Jewish friends there. And I'm sorry, it's a long one, so I'm trying to kind of parse it out, but they're trying to seek dialogue, and they're meeting with a lot of the they're saying that the JCC and the Federation are so pro-Israel and so pro-IDF that they don't feel like there's space for them. And they're wondering if there's any suggestions on how to approach some of those conversations.
I really feel for that person. I certainly am in a similar situation where, you know, my closest Jewish friend here in Montgomery is much more aligned with Israel in his heart than I am, and just, you know, feels much more strongly oriented toward Israel. I think I've had to, he and I have had conversations that I think are as hard and honest and wonderful as the conversations Ali and I have had, right? Because we also trust and love each other. And so we understand we come at this from different perspectives, and neither of us believes that the other has an obligation as a Jew to agree. We are not trying to persuade each other in some special way that entails our religious or ethnic identity. That's the only way forward I know, is to say to people that you disagree with, and you know you are probably going to continue disagreeing with them, that it's not a deeper judgment against them because they share certain identity factors with you. You can still talk, and we're both still grieving what happened and is happening. There's been another bomb threat here since then, also turned out to be false. We both experienced that together. We're both here in Montgomery, Alabama together, Jewish together, disagreeing on certain significant aspects of what's happening overseas. And that's the best we can do, is just be truthful with each other about that and say, but we're still here together, and know that this is at top of mind for each other. Dialogue is not the same as trying to convince people.
And you bring up such a great point, Leah. I know that, you know, this has definitely been very eye-opening for me, and I'm so sorry we're out of time. We're hitting that 1 o'clock mark, and there's really been some excellent conversations, and I'm very sorry that we've not been able to address all of the questions that are in the Q&A. We'll have to see if we can do some kind of a follow-up to that. But I think, you know, the common theme that I hear is that we do have different viewpoints. And, you know, if we can really keep the dialogue open and we can keep talking, at some point we'll get to understanding. And hopefully those are the lessons that we can take with us, is that if we can at least get some kind of an appreciation and keep talking, that eventually it's going to lead to something great, you know, something better, something more tolerable, so that we can figure out how to get along. I wish that all of us could solve world peace. Wouldn't that be amazing? But, you know, if we can at least solve something in our little corner of the world and in our community, then hopefully as time goes on, that will grow. So I do want to thank everybody, Ali, Leah, John, thank you for this gift of your time. It's been just tremendous. I really, really appreciate you being here. We appreciate everybody who was with us on this call today. We have our next program coming up on February 21st is The Power of Propaganda with Jen Goss. We hope you'll join us. If you're here local in Birmingham, we do have our film series happening. We would love to have you join us. Check out our website, check out our social media, lots and lots of really good things happening. And thank you all again for being here, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.